trails are being used, in brackets, shared by cyclists and pedestrians. Any suggestions on how we can reduce friction and accidents?
Actually, I put forward a motion to develop, in collaboration with Councillor Humphreys, to create a cycling master plan. Part of that master plan will be to develop bike lanes and actually make sure that they are in collaboration with people that are using the trails, and make sure that we do have bike lanes separate from people being able to use those trails and utilize them for walking. So we are going down that path. We've already hired the consultant to do the work on the cycling master plan, and we're going to develop that connectivity throughout our town.
I would start a cycling race in Aurora. We have the beautiful hills. We can make a course around St. John's around the perimeter and draw cyclists from all over the province to compete and race in Aurora.
Well, as someone who has both walked and ridden bicycles on many kilometers of Aurora's trails, I've sort of experienced it from both sides. So I think it's an ongoing problem we have when we mix cyclists, automobiles, and pedestrians anywhere. It's a matter of educating our cyclists, educating our walkers, and making sure that we continue to build that level of courtesy. As cyclists are hitting the trails, we need to make sure that they understand they're sharing the trail. As walkers are out there, we need to make sure that they understand that there are cyclists on the trails as well. We're trying to share them. We may have some walking-only trails that need to be dedicated, or perhaps some cycling-only trails that need to be dedicated, but more on that later.
I think we need to ensure that people who use the trails follow the rules of the road, separate the bicycles, separate the walkers, pay attention to what you're doing. I think would go a long way towards alleviating those issues.
I would just say that there are other examples of this in other jurisdictions. The City of Toronto, for example, on the Waterfront Trail has a really great example of separated bike and walking lanes, and we can certainly learn from other jurisdictions on this. And it would just take some time and education for everyone to realize that you walk on one side and cycle.
A couple of years ago at the farmers market, thank you, Rachel. A couple of years ago at the farmers market, we actually requested to have bike walks there. I think that there's another issue here, is that there's security for all of our cyclists as well. It's not a very friendly area to actually bring your bikes through, stay for the day, have a coffee, use facilities, etc., because there aren't any bike walks anywhere. We asked for that at Town Park, and it didn't happen.
I personally like to see a bike lane down the hydro field on near St. John's Side or the Bayview to Wellington. So then that way people don't have to go all the way over to Bayview to go from St. John's Side to Wellington. That's basically my idea.
Next question, what would you do to increase four-season outdoor rec space for all ages?
I think one of the things that we could look at would be an outdoor skating rink. We have our natural skating rinks, which are very weather dependent, and over the last number of years it's been a real challenge keeping those skating rinks going because of the variations. We've looked at a couple of options. I remember using outdoor skating rinks when I was a kid. They're expensive to operate, but if you look at the draw that they have, if you look at the success that Newmarket has had with their Riverwalk Commons skating, I think it would be a phenomenal investment in our downtown area, probably in around the downtown park area, town park area. You can bring portable ones in and out, so you can take the baseball diamond, put a portable rink there, run that for the winter, take it out, and convert it back into a baseball diamond in the summer.
On my platform, I do have a suggestion for a year-round skate pad that would be used for, well, in the wintertime we can't skate anymore. The ice doesn't stay frozen for more than a few days. So I had some people ask me to go to Hamilton to check out a skate pad there. And I did because I used to help manage and DJ at Roller Rink Aurora, that we brought thousands of people here to Aurora, a place called the Canadiana. So this is an outdoor skate pad, low-cost investment, and I went there and there was thousands of people from all over Ontario, from 7 to 77, and it was all paid for on a $1 trillion grant. So I think an outdoor skate pad year-round would be a novel idea and great for tourism. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, we are already creating a refrigerated ice surface within the Library Square. That's part of the revitalization of downtown core and the Library Square. That's going to be part of that development. So we're going to have an ice rink that's going to be able to be utilized pretty much for more times than what the outdoor rinks that are utilized right now. And it's also going to become a splash pad possibly during the summer. Those are the things that we are looking at moving forward. So that's the exciting things that we are doing. But we do need to actually look at all of our parks, open fields, open spaces, and look at how we can utilize them throughout all the seasons. So when it does become winter, maybe we utilize it for different purposes, the ball diamonds, such as was mentioned, a soccer field. What do we do with them during the winter? Don't just leave them dormant and not being used. Let's come up with some fresh ideas, move forward, and create those possibilities.
Talk in Aurora about active transportation and about our trail system. And it is an excellent trail system, but we don't plow it in the winter. It's not paved. It's not accessible at many times of the year, but certainly not in the winter for those who might be in wheelchairs or walkers. So I think that's a conversation we need to have with the public, because that would cost a lot of money, but it may be of great benefit.
You know, as an avid cross-country skier, I think, you know, we talked about our great trails. It would be great to have groomed trails in the wintertime, so those of us who like to cross-country, we can use our trails in the wintertime to do cross-country and activate the trails with all 4 seasons.
Suggestions, and I would add curling during the winter months to some of the pads that aren't used during the winter, like a ball.
The number of people who tell me in the wintertime how they would really appreciate it if we could clear a number of our trails, especially the ones that lead to the GO train. They have no way of getting to the GO train when the weather's bad, when there's snow, when there's slush, when there's ice. So we could do that to help get people out of doors. And again, I go back to one of my earlier comments. What can we do that would get kids out of the rec room and playing pickup hockey, shinny hockey, maybe just a matter of plowing some local rinks and making things, or parking lots, to let kids get out and play for themselves.
I personally like to take an idea from Oak Ridges. They have GPS mobile excursions. So it uses the user personal mobile phone. You download an app. You create a mobile GPS game within the town that shows our town historical sites and our sports sites and all that kind of stuff, and invite people out to community events and do it that way.
One of you mentioned spending more time outside and less in front of a screen, which I agree with wholeheartedly. However, in order to spend more time outside, to be able to do so, there must be an outside, quote unquote, outside available. Our trail systems, currently unpaved, represent the majority of Aurora's virtually untouched nature, and that nature is scarce as it is. Is it really a beneficial idea to pave these trails and remove that authentic nature from an already suburban community?
I mean, our trails, I agree, are natural, and they're rolling. I think the suggestion we are looking at is maybe paving the entrance or creating some of the trails for bike use. And, you know, it's a balance. So we have to meet that balance, and we have to engage our people and do some research and come up with some options and some solutions.
Well, I don't have too much to add other because I think we pretty much said it all. Again, I go back to let's make sure that the trails that get us somewhere, the active transportation trails, those ones that can get us from our houses to the supermarket or to the GO station, are well maintained throughout the winter. The rest of them, the large majority of our trails, we should be able to groom them in such a way that if you've got cross-country skis, you want to try a little snowshoeing, you can use them to get outside.
I've probably talked to as many people who are in favor of paving the trails as leaving them as they are. So I think what we do is we look at a strategic allocation of trails, spine trails that you would pave, that you turn into active transportation, that you use that to provide that different type of transit capability, active transportation, either running perhaps in the winter or using your bicycle. I think that's something we could look at. It needs to be defined. It needs to go in with a comprehensive plan as to what trails would you pick, how would you maintain it, and of course, what's the cost of it.
And this is part of the work that the Trails Committee has already started. As the chair of the Trails Committee, we've sat down many times and discussed how we're going to move forward with the trails, as was mentioned. Many Aurorans would like to see the trails remain as is. They don't want to see them paved. They also don't want to see, some don't want to see lighting, some do want to see lighting. And so these are the conversations that are happening at the committee level, and we're going to continue that through the work of the committee and talk with the residents and ensure that what we provide is not only what the residents want, but it's also fiscally responsible, and that we ensure that we're not digging into everyone's pocket to pay for something that necessarily everyone doesn't want.
Why have developers not been required to include more parks, green spaces, trails, which would promote outdoor activity? As mayor, would you ensure that development plans have to include such green spaces? Jeff, you want to start?
Under the Planning Act, when developers come forward with an application, they're responsible for parkland, for amenity space. Council then has to make a decision as do we want parkland there, or would we rather have cash in lieu that we put in the bank and perhaps build a park somewhere else. So we're very sensitive when we make these decisions. That comes through public planning, comes through council committee, comes through council meetings, as to how we deal with the developers in that, how we look at what is the best long-term interest for the town. Do we need a park there? Do we need a park somewhere else? So how can we manage that balance around the town? And we are still at slightly over 40% green space. So we have worked extremely diligently to ensure that we protect our green space, to ensure that we have those areas that are available for everyone moving forward as we build future generations.
Yeah, we do have to make, as a council, make a decision on whether we would require cash in lieu instead of parkland. At the end of the day, I think that there's nothing wrong with asking and ensuring that they provide more parklands. We want more green space. Once it's gone, it's gone. Sometimes we have to look at it and say, while it would be great to get cash instead of that parkland, sometimes it's better for us to have that parkland. Because as I said, once it's gone forever. And that's why we need to ensure that we keep pushing the development community. When they come into our town, they do what we want, not what they
I think
want.
council has not done a good job as new development rolls into Aurora in protecting trail property. It's not like a community park. It's not like a local park where you just say, this parcel of land remains untouched. Our trail system is far more sophisticated for that than that, and it involves us negotiating with developers when they come into Aurora that we connect this trail with this trail through their property. It requires some pretty sophisticated negotiation, some arm twisting at times perhaps, but it's not as simple as talking about protecting green space. The trail system is too important for us just to ignore, as I believe we have over the past 8 years. We need to continue to work with what little development we have to see how we can rescue the original plan, the great plan that people like David Tomlinson and Klaus Werenberg, and I was on the Trails Committee when I was on Town Council. I know how passionate people are in Aurora about our trails, our active transportation system. We need to make sure going forward we do not miss any more opportunities to build the trail system that was planned for us many years ago.
We just developed our last green space north of Wellington, and that was called the 2C lands, and we put in 42 kilometers of trails through a number of protected features, we call them, but they're forest stands. So that in my mind is outstanding planning. We can't take credit for it this term. It actually began, I think, in 2006, 2010. So they set it up, we continued it on. The Provincial Planning Act requires 5% or cash in lieu. So we're not given much in the way of leveraging with developers. What we have to do is start looking where we can find space, and we have 40% coverage, but that is largely due to the land south of Vandorf, and it's called Countryside Tableland under the Oak Ridges Moraine, and it allows for open fields to be developed there if the municipality identifies a need, which we surely do. So we have to take a plan and agree on a strategy and then move forward. So we can do a lot to accomplish moving forward to protecting our green space.
Folks living in co-ops need spaces for their kids to play sports, yet it can cost over $50 an hour to rent space in schools. How will you as mayor work to decrease the cost of facility renting?
We can't leave any child behind, any resident behind. We subsidize many things in this town. I don't think that's a problem, and I think everyone around here would agree that if we have to, for certain residents, if we have to help them out, to get them out, to get them active, to allow them to experience these opportunities, well, then we need to provide those opportunities for them.
You know, the question really touches on accessibility of sports for kids throughout, and adults throughout, but primarily kids throughout. I know that as mayor, one of the things I would do is really work hard to build the necessary relationship with the public school board. I know we've had a good one with our Catholic school board. We've done some great work on multi-purpose fields. We need to build that same relationship with the public school board. You know, I'm fond of saying there's only one taxpayer. And whether we're funding school boards or the town, there's only one taxpayer. We need to be able to figure out a better way to use facilities that sort of close at 4 o'clock at night and don't open until 8 o'clock in the morning. How can the town get in there and use it? The second part to the answer may be that we work with private not-for-profit organizations. I can think of the Aurora Basketball League. Bill Kozovsky and his family run that for well over 25 years. They've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children come through that program. That's a very low-cost program that they run because all of the talent, that's the coaching, etc., is donated. So the town doesn't always have to do everything itself. The town can also look for organizations that it can work with. We certainly need to work better with our school boards.
I would echo, we have to work with our school boards, most definitely. Perhaps it's a combination of pooling some revenues, maybe reducing a bit of the property tax for places like co-ops, and then using a bit of that pooling to be matched by sponsorships to pay those permit fees. So we have to think sort of how are we going to look after so everyone can participate. We're a great community, a giving community. We can work out some sort of a subsidy through permits. There will be a little excess pool that will be put into these sort of situations.
There is an incredible amount of philanthropic services, goodness gracious, it's late in the election season, I can hardly speak. There's a tremendous amount of philanthropy that goes on already. Many of our sports organizations right now subsidize kids who play. As I mentioned earlier, Canadian Tire Jumpstart does an incredible amount of work for children. All kids can play through sport or work, does a tremendous amount of work. We have to be incredibly sensitive as to how we approach these things because it is a very sensitive issue for parents who come to either the town or to one of our sports organizations to try and say, how can I get my child into sport? I can't afford to do that. We do work with those people on a regular basis. We need to understand that it's not just that systemic, permit fee thing. It's a deeper issue. We have to work with everyone to decide how we move forward on that and how we move forward in a respectable way.
I've analyzed the user fee policy that the current council put together, and I must compliment the current council. It's a good, solid policy that provides a good level of subsidization for very basic programming. So I do compliment you on that. In the future, what I'd like to see is a special stream introduced for special needs or inclusive programming, as well as a special stream that would motivate individuals to go on to to work directly with the town, as a camp counselor, lifeguard, swimming instructor, or something like that. And I think that's a good way to move forward in the future. When we look at specifically at rental rates, the rental rates are pretty generous. We have to make sure that we find efficiencies within our programming to ensure that we keep those rates in the future.
Two things that I wanted to touch upon that I heard tonight. But to me are pretty serious. One, I heard a number of 90,000 residents. And that's the first time I've ever heard of that. And that's unplanned growth. It's not part of our official plan, so I don't know where that number came from. And it's a scary number because we should be very careful when we throw those kind of numbers out there. It's unplanned growth. The second thing is, I'm not sure who it was, but we were speaking about the sport council. And someone had referred to, suggested that, didn't know where that came from. And I'm just going to read from our sports plan that was adopted by council in 2016. And it was referenced in my speech. Priority recommendations: sports leadership, develop an Aurora sports policy, expand the role of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee to include sport, reconstitute Sport Aurora to a sport council. It's the document. I think it was Mr. Mayor that we had mentioned that you hadn't known about that. And include sports to provide one voice for sports. and hire a sport development officer to implement sports plan, and finally develop a sustainability model for sports in Aurora. I'm in favor of that, and I think we should have started in 2006, and we're well past that.
First Shift, which is another Canadian Tire program, which provides an introduction to hockey, some equipment, and first 6 sessions. It sold out in about 4 hours when it was available this year. I know some people were trying to get into it, not very good at the internet, thought it was an internet problem, and but fortunately they could register a new market. So there is work apparently to do there, a very high demand and not enough supply. Also, just wanted to reiterate the one idea that I mentioned, and maybe in my blitzkrieg reading at the end you might have missed, but having a ride-sharing service very similar to what Innisfil does with Uber, but perhaps maybe with Lyft in our community, and replace YRT buses will benefit so many different aspects. It'll benefit our commuters in the morning without having immediate parking problems. It will help our seniors get to appointments during the day. Buses are not convenient for seniors, don't stop on the right side of the street at the Senior Association, they don't stop at seniors' homes. But from a sporting point of view, it will help get our kids to these activities, and especially when we're talking about underprivileged kids, where maybe both parents are working. So now you get the kids in an activity, and now it's extra stress on the family of how are they going to actually get there. So having a ride-sharing service where we can have door-to-door, and maybe even have subsidized chits for people who are in these programs, I think will be the last missing piece that we need to have better participation.
Just wanted to reiterate what Mayor Dawes said about, it is a humbling experience for people to come and ask for help. And having worked in social services for just over a decade, I think we have to look outside the box. And I think a great example is events like Welcoming Arms and Rise and Shine Breakfast and things like that. It's a different entity. But if we start doing things like that related to sports, like more open houses and more open events like that, people do humble themselves when they realize what is available. And seeing that through things like Rise and Shine, where people have gotten involved in other things because they went to community that was offered to them. So I think outside the box thinking is the way we really need to go, even in sport and getting people involved.